Looks like we're live.
We are live on YouTube. Have we always been live or have we been like delayed broadcast?
Live.
We are always we broadcast every meeting on YouTube.
Okay. Hello, Brandon. How are you?
Hey, how's it going? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Hey, yes, ma'am. How's everything going?
It's good. Judge.
Everybody, how are you? Good.
Ever stop being high judge when you've been a judge forever?
You know what? I've gotten so many emails, I haven't read them all. We just had another meeting, and when I got off, I had all these emails. So I apologize. Anybody on yet who hasn't been able to get into those links in our shared drive? Anybody? Okay.
There's a lot of information that I've been able to get on. I'm having trouble deciphering it all, but I've been able to see titles and so forth. So,
well, don't forget what we said. You know how to eat an elephant one bite at a time.
Yeah, I can't even eat this elephant.
You don't. It's really big. I mean, you just can't get your arms around everything, but we just wanted to have sort of a repository of information. And right. Councilwoman Masadi, you got on.
The only thing is, Laura, can you give me the ID? Because I join in with iPad, so I can look at my screen with all my documents. Is there I've got the meeting ID, but can you give me a login number?
That should be in your Zoom. In that link, there is a password at the end of that.
I didn't see it. That's why I came in on the laptop and on my computer. That's my iPad.
I thought you didn't have to use a password, but it was built into your link.
It is if you go on the link.
Okay.
Well, have we gotten the procedures? Because I tried to look at that procedure, that PowerPoint on when there's a police misconduct allegation, who it goes in front of and the administrative review part, but I could not pull that PowerPoint up. From the city law department, I guess that's who did that PowerPoint. Or
I think it was from the city law department. And Councilmember Masadi, I got on just by typing in the 7 or whatever, how many digits code this is, 11. It didn't make me do a password.
Right, it usually doesn't. When I go on an iPad, I can't give it yet.
Oh, okay.
The difference, I go on an iPad because I watch my other screen with all my documents.
And all it has is a meeting ID. It does not have, yeah.
Usually with our other groups, we get password. So that's I just don't know how to access all the documents.
Hey everybody, this is Quinn. We've had some folks join just in the past couple minutes. Just want to remind everybody we're live on YouTube. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'll also remind folks to mute yourself if you can, so we can refrain from background noise if possible.
Okay.
Right. So we're sitting at 4 o'clock. Good afternoon, everybody. We will go ahead and get started. We continue to have a very robust agenda, so thank you all for being here. Let me begin by reading our COVID statement. Then we'll get approval of the minutes. Then we'll jump into the agenda. So due to the COVID-19 pandemic, state of emergency, and Governor Beshear's executive orders regarding social distancing, this meeting is being held via teleconference pursuant to Senate Bill 150, as signed by the governor on March 30th, 2020, and Attorney General's opinion 20-05, and in accordance with KRS 61.826, because it is not feasible to offer a primary physical location for this meeting. Okay. You should have received or you have access to in our Google Drive, which is becoming quite the robust repository of information. You will have received the minutes from our previous meeting last Thursday, the 16th. And so I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes from our previous meeting.
I so move.
Been moved. Is there a second? The second moved by Judge Corsoni, second by Sister Queen. Call for question. No question. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Hand raise, aye. All opposed? All right. Minutes approved, motion carries. Thank you for that. Quinn, you've got the share screen disabled. I don't know if that's your intent, but I would like to be able to have that ability to share it if we need to.
Stand by. Let me fix that really fast.
Great. While he's doing that, I want to tell those that are currently viewing, thank you for being here with this law enforcement, justice, and equity or accountability subcommittee of the Mayor's Commission on Justice and Racial Equity. Those that are viewing outside of this meeting should know that you can provide your comments during this meeting on the live feed, I believe. Is that right, Laura? As well as there is an email address, and it is racialjustice@lexingtonky.gov. We are reviewing comments, and we are reviewing all emails. In fact, those comments and emails are being synthesized by our great staff support that is coming from the mayor's office in the person of Laura Hatfield. Thank you, Laura. Thank Andrea James last week for standing in lieu of you. But they are recording those and they're uploading those so the entire committee can see those comments and we can fold that information in as appropriate to our planning. We won't be able to make those responses as a committee to each email, though they will be acknowledged by our staff support. And again, know that those comments are being taken into consideration, and where there's follow-up that's needed, we'll be able to do that. I was going to tell you that welcome Judge Murphy. She had stated that she may be a little late, so thank you for being here as well.
Thank you.
Well, so this being our third meeting, let me want to make sure that we remain in a place of focus. Want to make certain that we continue to recall exactly why we're here. In our first meeting, we were reminded by our commission co-chairs that we are to acknowledge, to ask and act and take action. And we are seeking to do that. We are not here because we believe systemic and systematic. We're not here to prove that systemic and systematic racism exists. We're here because it has been proven that it exists. This is an interesting piece. I don't know if y'all can see this screen. Nod with me if you can see what I'm sharing on this screen. This is a picture that many of you have seen. George Stinney. It's back in 1944, and that's just a little descriptor below it that he was convicted and was proceeded and went on to be incarcerated at the age of 14 for the murder of two little girls. It was a tragic murder of two little girls. This all happened in less than, I think, 4 months. And some 70 years later, this young man, after this execution, it was found that he had an unfair trial and likely was not even guilty of this. 14 years old. That is a symbol, a very unfortunate symbol of what we're dealing with. It started with a charge that was inaccurate and ended with an execution, and went on to be proven that it was wrong. He was executed and incarcerated and executed all within the year that he was the age of 14. Many believe that he was likely innocent. Some would say that was in 1940. We don't have that issue anymore. There's also instances of a brother named Khalif Browder, 16-year-old, that was put in Rikers Island at age 16, stayed there 3 years before it was found that he was innocent of the crimes that he was convicted of. He went on to several months later, that we believe from the trauma that he dealt with there at Rikers, to commit suicide. These are the issues that we're working to make certain do not happen. Of course, there are the recent issues that we know about. So I just wanted to keep that before us, that this work is about systems, as we've said, and not people, not the people in the systems. And it is the work that we're doing is literally a matter of life and death. And so it is a dubious distinction that we have, but I believe we're up for the task, and we believe that each of us in this time, in a time such as this, can make a change that has not been made heretofore. So thank you for your continued commitment to this. Also wanted to recognize some of the comments and things that have come in from the committee. Many of you are grinding, you're doing great work. Thank you for that. You're doing work outside of this time. It's going to continue to take that. You're doing exploration outside of this time. It's going to take that. We're uploading things daily almost over the weekend. Up until probably 5 minutes ago, we were receiving information. And a good point was made of one of our colleagues here, and we'll continue to address that. How can we seriously look at something that came 20 minutes ago, right? How can we consider that during this time? We understand that. We've got several great students on here. Now, that has not been my history. I like stuff just before the test because I know how to cram, but some people really want to pull this stuff back, right? And that's great. And that's why we're blessed to have the composition, those that really want to disaggregate this information. We need that. Please know that we're not expecting every piece of information to be addressed each meeting or right at the meeting. And this is a process. Secondly, understand that we are going to go and allow folks to be sort of in their areas of expertise, and that's what we're seeking to move towards. So you'll see us moving towards that. And so thank you for bringing those things out. Additionally, if there are pieces that we're getting that you think are superfluous to what we need, we don't need that. Or if we're getting off track, that's what this team needs to guide, and that's what this team needs to be providing leadership to do. So we appreciate all of those comments. So, Judge Kaufman and myself have continued to do exploratory meetings as well. We'll be talking about one today as we move through the agenda. We're continuing to try to represent this group as best we can. Laura, are you feeling okay about the flow of information back to you? I'm seeing that you're getting some informations from committee members, which is great. What we will want to be certain is that we try to maintain as best we can. We're not trying to control anything for certain, Judge Kaufman and myself, but points of contact be as succinct and as structured as possible, so we're not just shotgunning everywhere. But things seem to be flowing and coming at a reasonable rate.
I think as long as the requests come from you all, so once they're sent to me, I know that that is something that you all want to be gathered and uploaded. The one thing that we probably need to look at, if you all have been on the shared drive, the law enforcement is pretty hefty. There's a lot of documentation in there and wouldn't want you all to get lost in that, the LPD. And so we might want to organize that even further. So I'll see how you all want to go about organizing that and see if we can do that on subcategories.
Thank you. That's a discussion we can have today. If people have suggestions on how to best organize that information, we can do that. So last thing on the repository, we'll jump into the agenda. Last thing on the housekeeping that's around that repository of information. We have had, and maybe some others have had, but from our last meeting, we had requests like, can the public have access to that repository of information? Can we open up the Google Drive? Logistically and probably appropriately, we cannot do that. But as we are those things that are appropriate for us to use as we talk with our citizenship, as we talk with our other peer groups, as we talk with other groups, that the commission or the committee should do that at their discretion. Laura, you had a comment about that?
I think we're going to figure out how we can do that. Everything that you all are looking at is available via open records. And so we will work to find out how we can make what you all are looking at available to others.
But not editable.
Not editable, correct. Not editable,
right.
Yes.
All right. We're gonna make everyone that's on this call today or watching say the word editable 7 times quickly. Pull that off. All right. So thank you, Laura. That's good clarification. And so others that will want this information could have access to it. And I think that's part of transparency that we're trying to build. So thank you for that, as long as it cannot be manipulated. So that'll be good. All right. We ended our last meeting, a good meeting, we believe. Judge, any other housekeeping that you can think of? All right. We ended our last meeting. We were finishing up, Chief Maynard, with some information. There was a pretty long list of requests that you had given. So I want to start by, we're going to wrap up this section of exploration, because we are starting with law enforcement. It's going to be heavier weight, particularly on the front end. We want to respond to give folks the opportunity to respond to some of the things that have come in. I have a couple of specific questions about a couple of things that have come in, and then we'll move from there. So does anybody have, because I've been talking a bit, does anybody have any additional questions for Chief Maynard as we are on the law enforcement component and the components that we were looking at and that we're moving forward with, or the information that you've had an opportunity to review to this point?
The question, and I think it just comes from, I've heard the Black clergy as well as the general chapter of the NBA and just citizens wanting to know about, can we implement a citizens review board for police disciplinary conduct? So my question is that I know that there's a process when there is a charge of police inappropriate conduct made, depending on the level of that. It goes through some investigation. When I read the material, there's a 60-day type of investigation, and that's done by the Public Integrity Unit. And correct me if I get wrong, Brian. And then that Public Integrity Unit, who's on that Public Integrity Unit? I guess first of all is my question. Who makes that unit up?
So the Public Integrity Unit is comprised of a commander and 2 lieutenants.
Okay, so we got the police investigating the police. So
Yes,
when there's an allegation of misconduct, the police then investigate themselves. Is that kind of what it is?
Yes, on the formal complaints, they're investigated by the
So
public
that's the Police Integrity Union, and then they have, and then there's no public comment at all allowed when something's under investigation. So the public's not told anything, right?
That is correct. By KRS, by state law.
Right, I'm looking at KRS, it's 15.520.
Yes. Well, that and Keith Horn's presentation that you had talked about that he
Yeah, and I
provided.
couldn't see it. I tried to look at it, but I couldn't really view it. And so then I understand the chief meets with the alleged officer, to impose the disciplinary action, or if not, it goes to a disciplinary review board.
Correct. The chief will meet with the officer once the public integrity investigation is complete, and the chief can then offer recommendation to the officer or go ahead and move it forward to the disciplinary review board.
Okay.
If the officer accepts it, he can by law, or he or she can by law, and it is a letter of conformity that then will go to the council. That's the final stage for us as far as
A little bit to this disciplinary review board. When I look at that membership, it's 7 members. 6 are assistant chiefs. 1 is a FOP member, and 1 is a Department of Law, but not a voting member. So that's again the police, and the police, right?
So you have 6 members that come from command staff. It's typically 2 assistant chiefs and 4 commanders that make up that review. And then if the officer that is charged is an FOP member, then by contract, they have a right to have an FOP representative that is selected by the FOP to sit in on that hearing. And then there is a law department liaison that does sit in there. There's a non-voting that makes sure that we have any questions procedural wise by law that can help answer those.
So the first investigation is done by the Public Integrity Union, which is basically the police. And then the second one, when there's a disciplinary review board, that's a 7-member panel, which is also the police. And so then after that, it can go to the full council. Is that right?
Yes. So once the officer can either accept chief's recommendation, or if chief pushes it towards the disciplinary review board, or the officer decides not to accept chief's initial offer, they then can have it heard from the disciplinary review board. Once the disciplinary review board hears it, then they provide their response to what the recommendation for the charge is, goes back to the chief. Chief can then act upon that recommendation or provide further insight into review of that, provide that offer to the officer. The officer then can accept that offer or decide they want to take it forward to the city, the council, and then the council is heard. That case is presented by the law department to the council.
And then that council's decision, I guess, is the final level of appeal, or is there a court appeal that the officer can make?
There is an opportunity for the officer to make an appeal. I believe it's to circuit court at that point.
Okay. So at what point? Now, all the requests that I've heard is for an independent citizens review board, and not let the police police the police, but let the citizens at least have some input and some oversight into that disciplinary action. So does it have to be an amendment to the KRS, for that board to exist, or is that a collective bargaining, requirement? Where is it that we can get citizens review of these infractions or alleged infractions being made by the police?
So the KRS does state for Lexington that we do not have a citizens review board. So that would have to be changed by law. Our contract also states that. It kind of mirrors that same language. So that would also have to be changed. There's an opportunity.
Contract with the FOP? Is that what you contract? What contract are you referring to?
The collective bargaining agreement stipulates how the discipline process works as well. A lot of that mirrors what state law is, but it is outlined in both. So the state law would have to change. Collective bargaining agreement would have to change. The mayor has put forward a review for an after action, so to speak, to look at things going moving forward at this point, since the state law is going to take some time to change. So that is also being discussed, my understanding.
Is there a pre-filed bill or anything going on in the legislature about that type of allowing the citizen review boards? Do you know anything, Chief, about that, or?
Not that I'm aware of at this time.
Okay.
So my question, and actually I was gonna ask this question because that is one of the, maybe the low hanging fruits. I don't know how you want to say it because we know that that has been the big request. If, just as Judge Isaac just stated, it's probably not a pre-filed bill, but my request, and I can send this to the chairs, is that we ask the council to pass a resolution in support of making those changes to the KRS. And it would go to our Lexington legislators and delegates within Lexington that would provide not only changes to the KRS so that we could have the Citizens Review Board, but additionally also allow for the chief to have a little more flexibility when it comes to discipline, so that if there is some alleged egregious violation, that the chief can dismiss them immediately instead of their having to go through the process. But because we know it has to go through the legislature to make these changes, you're going to have full support from the legislature. And so that's going to take, I think, our council buying in and signing a resolution of support. Following that, then I think then it's going to, I also think that we need to make a request in our recommendations that the city put lobbying money behind those changes, because we're going to be up against more than likely the FOP's lobby to not make those changes. I don't know that for sure, but that's a possibility. So those are, I mean, it's definitely going to take those changes. Diane, to answer your question.
I would add to that comment that, you know, typically this is an area that I know a good bit about citizen review boards, and just that typically in other cities across the country, this does typically take a good bit of time. And I certainly agree with Judge Murphy's comments about, you know, the process that the local council has to take. It also involves community commitment and engagement. You know, and a lot of discussions about that, you know, take place before that happens. And there are various models of civilian oversight that are and hybrids of those models that exist across the country. But it is typically certainly a very serious process, and one that takes a good bit of time. And I think I don't want to, you know, put an exact time on it, because for every city it's very different. But, you know, I would say that could take up to 2 years at least, you know, and that's a loose number, you know, to have that in place.
What I didn't see was that the makeup is statutorily determined. The makeup for the Public Integrity Union and the makeup for the, you know, the disciplinary review boards, are they statutorily mandated that they've got to have these chiefs and commanders on them?
Are you asking about, it couldn't be a citizen put on there mainly because
it has to be a current active duty chief, commander, someone of that nature? Because I couldn't find the definition on, I know who was there, but I couldn't find if they were statutorily mandated as to what their title had to be.
No, it's not. But Chief Maynard, you probably can answer the question more succinctly.
So my understanding of the Police Officer Bill of Rights, it has to be investigated a certain way in a certain time period. As far as the makeup of the board, that is set up by the collective bargaining agreement, the contract, as far as who makes up that board. That's where that comes from.
So we can attack this in multiple fashions, I assume, you know, and get the board makeup kind of altered. And to that point where it may not be just a basic citizen walking down the street, but somebody who we could, you know, maybe a former police officer, you know, something that could at least fit the definition to get someone other than just the current, because, you know, the whole theory is that I got my back, you know, blue got the blues back. And so if that's all we've got working this, then we've got a problem, I think, at least with the perception of the public, that we got the police policing the police. And that's just not going to get us a whole lot of, you know, integrity.
So,
and I go ahead.
Oh, no, please go ahead, Judge Murphy, and then I'm gonna jump in. And
I could be wrong, and this is just from my past life at the law department, but the reason that we could not have a citizen on is because the charges against an officer are not public until they actually become formal charges. So that investigation, and that's the reason it's the police investigating the police. And that's statutorily mandated that their Bill of Rights, that these misconduct allegations are not made public until the end of them. And I know that that's not helpful.
Right, but I don't understand if they have to be our local police. Can they be like the FBI? I mean, can they be like another agency that is, defined with policing that doesn't have to be the same people you sleeping with every night?
But aren't there city boards that have certain powers like the Ethics Commission? That's not a public investigation, but there are citizens who participate. So that's a citizen-made board that's not made public. I mean, there are all kinds of ways that you could have non-employees of a group and have an outside person who is bound by rules of confidentiality participate. So I don't understand why that wouldn't be possible under this circumstance if the members aren't statutorily defined.
And I think this is probably something to have Keith Horn. We had talked about having individuals that are more knowledgeable on the process come speak or follow up with. So Keith Horn could probably provide better insight. I think Melissa.
And
there's a great deal of knowledge. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
He was the one who gave the presentation before the city council.
He's the managing attorney.
Erling, yes. I mean, I heard his presentation about it, but it never was clear. I mean, I don't think that was a specific question that he answer, so perhaps he would have to come back. But to bind people in a confidential way is not challenging.
No,
so to say that, so the statute doesn't define that the persons on the board have to be police officers, just that they have to be confidential in the process.
You're right.
That seems to me to be a relatively simple thing to overcome by binding that person within the realm of confidentiality. I mean, one of the things that seems clear is that there is a desire in this community for some greater citizen participation at earlier steps of the process.
Right.
I also had a question about whether or not the Public Integrity Unit could call other witnesses.
Dr. Price, could I interrupt you just for a moment, please? I've been checking and I don't know who's on the phone here. Who is this number 221-2630? Could you tell us, please?
Lenny Stoltz.
Does that, pardon me? Pardon me, could you say that again? I don't, does anyone recognize that number, or does the number belong to anybody on the committee?
Judge Kaufman, I've been checking with some folks. I'm not real sure who it is either. I can kick them out if you all would like me to do so. I just wanted to make sure it wasn't a member, because I can't bring them back in if I kick them out. So
does that number belong to anyone?
Yeah, whoever is 859-221-2630, either identify verbally or in chat, or you'll be kicked out in like the next 45 seconds. Let me say this to
I've been muted.
I'm sorry, could you identify yourself, please? We just don't know who you are.
Lenny Stoltz. I've been kicked off the website, and it looks like now you can hear me. I'm not muted.
Oh, well, I can see that you're on here. And if you, this is just for the members of the committee to be on here, but if you want to email us or you can send it to that address that Mr. Cozart mentioned earlier, racialjustice@lexingtonky.gov. Or Laura, didn't you also say that they could chat live with us?
On YouTube.
On YouTube. Would you mind doing that, Mr. Stoltz?
Seems like another closed process, but if that's what you want to do in a public proceeding.
No, it's perfectly open. You're welcome. Okay, thank you.
We'll proceed. Thank you,
Dr. Price, I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
And I guess it's a question for Mr. Horn, but I'm just asking this question that the confidentiality of the process could be preserved with a community member present. There are ways to do this if it's possible. So,
and think the direction of what you were talking about with looking at the makeup of the disciplinary review board could
It's
probably be a
happening.
recommendation from
Right.
our committee.
Mhm.
And then that can be further reviewed on how that would take process, whether the selection of the individuals and or the confidentiality at that part is an opportunity to review further. But you had another question, Dr. Price, regarding calling witnesses.
Yes.
Or investigating. The Public Integrity Unit, as part of their investigation, does call or interview other witnesses that may be a part of it, whether it's the formal complainant that files an outside formal complaint or other officers that were involved in it. That is part of their processes for that investigation.
And every person is allowed to have legal counsel present, even witnesses appearing before the Public Integrity Unit. And if they can't afford them, are they provided with some sort of support or advocate during the process?
Not for the Public Integrity Unit, because it's not a criminal investigation. The Public Integrity Unit addresses more policy and procedural type things, not criminal acts. So if an officer is going to be charged criminally, that public integrity investigation cannot provide information to the criminal investigation. The criminal investigation stands on its own, if that makes sense. The Public Integrity Unit will follow and kind of mirror the same path and keep notes, but they're more for the formal procedural aspect, where a criminal investigation would be where you would want to have your attorney present, and they are allowed to have that attorney present.
No, I understand that, but I'm thinking of a scenario, for instance, where someone may have made a claim about excessive force during an arrest, and that person is under criminal investigation, and they may have some sort of conflict in the ways and with the police department. So there's no chance for any kind of witness to have any kind of advocate explain to them what's being said or how they might, just to understand their rights within this whole scenario. None.
If a civilian's coming in, is that what
Yeah,
you're talking about?
that's right.
They can have their attorney present during that conversation.
So let me do this for us. And I saw your hand, Councilman Masadi. Let me offer this. So this is one of those things that if by consensus, this body says, we know this is going to be a recommendation, and it is something that we want to move forward even now, I believe we can do that. There's a great deal of expertise, obviously, on the call around this. We also have those that we can consult about if there's any unclarity about current process, if there's any additional information we need at the KRS process, we know that that's going to have to be next session, but what can we do now? I would also suggest that shared with this group was the council meeting in which former Councilwoman Angela Evans laid out a group of things that we can actually do now under current statute. We may want to review that. So let me offer this. Are there those that would like to work on this particular recommendation, the Citizens Review Panel, which is locally and in some ways nationally, many cities are seeing this as one of the can't wait sorts of things and are moving towards this. And if this is going to be a recommendation, strong recommendation of this commission, I think we could put it forward, and that we would want to develop that recommendation to a form that we could put it forward perhaps even earlier than the larger proposal. Sister Minifield, you introduced that today. So is that offering acceptable to this group?
Yes.
Is that a yay, or is that a I got to talk? So do we need to entertain an emotion on it, or?
Judge Corsoni had a question.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, first of all, is the collective bargaining agreement, is it up on the Dropbox or wherever where we can actually see it?
Yeah, there are a couple of them. They're disaggregated. And Brian, you may want to, Chief, you may want to say how that is disaggregated, because there are two.
Yeah, so the collective bargaining agreement covers officers and sergeants, and then there's another one that covers lieutenants and captains.
Okay.
Both of them cover discipline in Article 15. So that they're very similar on both contracts for Article 15.
Well, I apologize. I haven't had a chance to read it. Now, the statutes I can get a hold of. Now I can look at the contract, but it seems to me that some of these review panels that some of these cities have adopted have had mixed results. You know, it hasn't been the end all. And I'm wondering whether the focus might be better served at looking at who's actually doing the investigating. Whether a separate arm, such as an independent investigator, that might serve our interests better. Trying to get some objective work done here. So inspector generals, we hear about them in Washington, but I don't know whether this might be an answer, but I think the committee clearly wants to look at this area, but I'm not so sure the standard model of the citizen review panel is the best way. So I'd like a little more information on what's out there and what we could possibly come up with that might work. If we can come up with something that doesn't require legislative changes, sounds like we might be able to implement that without waiting for a couple of years.
Might I suggest just a broader category, and that is disciplinary procedures? A couple of people, Dinah Queen and Melinda Price, have already volunteered to work in that area of disciplinary procedures. It's a broader category than just Citizens Review Board. And I agree with Judge Scorsone, that might not be the best way to go. And do I hear you, Ms. Minifield, also wanting to work in the area of disciplinary procedures?
I do. I definitely want to work in the area of disciplinary procedures, but I know that the public that we have been, charged with kind of listening to what their concerns are, have definitely raised this concern about a independent citizens review board. But I don't think, like them, that I understand where that would come in at in the process. Can we have it at the integrity unit, at the investigative stage? It doesn't have to be, when we say an independent review board, it doesn't have to be down there at the disciplinary review board. We can stick our citizens review and our citizens, input at any stage of the process, and is my position. I'm not saying, like Judge Crisani is saying, it has to be something that's at the KRS stage, so why can't we move it somewhere else? But as long as we've got a citizen's input, it doesn't necessarily have to be at a citizens review board like other states have called that. We can call our animal anything we want to call it.
But you're still talking about the whole disciplinary process, right?
Somebody other than the police is policing the police. Somebody other than the people that's sleeping together at night, are having some insight and overview of what's going on in that area.
So what we know, Councilwoman here, I'm coming right to you. But what we know to this point, and I think it's good to be it's good to be highlighted. We know that there is a large contingency of the Lexington community that are using the Citizens Review Panel language. I think if we get something that has the tenets that we know are right and good and aligned with that, it could be called anything. Councilwoman Masadi, I want to get to you if it's on this subject matter here, and then we're going to move in the agenda as best we can. Then Sister Queen, I see you as well. I see you. So right after Councilwoman. You're muted, sis.
Let me assure you all that the council is the Citizens Review Committee. We have the authority, when the allegation is made against a police officer is brought.
You're a little faint, Councilwoman. I don't know if you're far away from the mic.
That's the issue I have with the big screen. So hopefully you can hear me now. Can you hear me?
Better.
Currently, the council is the Citizens Review Board. When the allegation is brought in front of us, it is determined by the chief what the discipline is. We make the final decision. And there have been times that we have not agreed with the chief. And we have sent it back and said, we don't agree with whatever the infraction is, or the punishment is compared to what the infraction is. We have done that in the past. But there are several of us that feel that we probably don't have, our part in the process is not early enough. We get it brought to us at a council meeting and says, this is the allegation. The chief proposes this, yay or nay. And we ask a few questions, but we don't have a lot of information, although we can ask those questions. And again, as I said, we have sent some of those responses, we have sent them back. Also, there's been talk about, with some of my other council members, about us trying to get a person from each district. Each council member would pick a person from each district and then submit to the mayor. And we would ask the mayor, based upon the collective bargaining agreement, to put forth one of these particular, appointees on the committee. Now that's been in discussion a lot. So I will tell you that this is not something that's new. We've been talking about this for a while. It's just that, again, there is a process for it.
Thank you. Sister Queen?
Thank you. I would say that everything everyone said is actually pretty on point about a lot of things. We are collecting a lot of data. There's a lot of information coming in. We're analyzing all that information and understanding where the real needs of, of issues may lay. As Judge Scorsone mentioned, other cities have inspector general offices or an office or someone appointed to look at some certain types of citizen complaints, or where citizens can directly just go to. That is not directly the police department. There are part and parcels of all of these pieces. There are 3 distinctive different types of civilian oversight models, but there are a lot of ways to get there. And I think ultimately it's about that due diligence and about what the community's will is, behind how they see that, and the perception of transparency of policing and disciplinary matters and issues related to race and people of different ethnicities. But long story short, I just think it really requires a really pretty thorough, due diligence piece of really talking to the community, listening to them, and making sure that whatever mechanism, if one is needed, that one is allowed to be in place. And maybe, and as Councilmember Masadi said, the representatives of each council district, all those pieces, can be a part of how civilians participate, in oversight and connectivity to the police department. Not only is it it comes from proactive pieces and also preventative measures, for issues that you don't want to happen in the future. I mean, all of that is really important. So I would just say to the chairs and to the other commission members that, I'd like to see just a thorough, way that we process that out to see what is needed, if it is the longer term legislative pieces or not, or are there some other, just as effective ways that can happen that really, that address the needs of the community.
Thank you. And it may not have to be an either or, it could be a both and hopefully it is a both and in our longer term report and plan and unabridged recommendations. But I would suggest that Sister Minifield, you introduced us today, if you would be willing to formulate on that specific piece of the citizens review, what we're using the language of citizens review panel or board, that if you would craft something that we could get before us for a motion in our upcoming meetings as a recommendation. And that may require you talking to some of your, if you please, to some of your subcommittee colleagues here. Sister Baird, I'm going to give it to you, and then Judge Kaufman, you can move us in the agenda.
Okay, thanks. And I just have a quick question about the process. I don't mind being part of that with Diane as well, because a lot of those reviews come through our office as well. So I don't mind being part of that with her and having that conversation. But Ryan, I did have I don't always 100% know the process. It's just what comes to us. So my question is, a couple of them kind of go back to back. The Public Integrity Unit, well, you mentioned them, there's 3 of them, and they do the initial investigation. I guess if there's some allegation or whatever, there's an initial investigation, and that involves talking with witnesses or talking with the people who make the complaint or whatever. Do they then just present their findings to the chief, or do they make a recommendation disciplinary wise to the chief?
No, they make an overview summary for the chief to review, and then chief makes his or her decision on what they feel is the correct offer, whether that's the initial Well, after the disciplinary review board hears it and before it goes to council, the chief's recommendation is what goes forward to council.
Okay, so the public integrity unit doesn't make a recommendation. They just say, here's what I found out. And then the
Correct.
chief kind of makes that, and then the officer can then either accept that and then it's done, or can disagree with that, and then it goes to the disciplinary review board.
Correct on both, but I'll add that even if the officer does choose to accept it and sign a letter of conformity, it goes to council, and council is the final say on whether that is accepted or not. Just like Councilmember Masadi talked about, if there is a recommendation that comes forward and they are understanding that they don't agree with what that is, then they can send it back for further review, which they've done on occasion, is my understanding.
Okay, and so I'm just asking in terms of where the citizens review board, whatever language we call it, citizens would apply, or where they would be in that process. Now, this all, I guess, is just related to violations of general orders or violations of some sort of police rule, because if it's a criminal investigation, I know Kentucky State Police reviews at least some of those. Do they review all of them when there's some? I know at least for shootings, I had one that was a rape. All those types of things are investigated by Kentucky State Police.
You're exactly right. We have, for the past several years, any criminal investigation, we've gone outside of us and have Kentucky State Police to provide those investigations to make it cleaner, so that we're not investigating, don't have anything to do with that. KSB will come in and they will do the full investigation for us and go directly to either the county or the Commonwealth Attorney's Office. They don't even report back to us on the criminal investigation. Our public integrity unit will have that information or get that information later for the administrative side, when those criminal charges then turn into a more formal, what policy violations occurred during that. But the criminal side of it is strictly gone to the investigate.
Okay. That's all I have.
Thank you. Again, public, you can leave comments on YouTube. You can also email at racialjustice@lexingtonky.gov. We will look forward to our next meeting, in which we will be able to take this component a step further and identify if it falls in the, where it falls in a broader topic of discipline, but certainly want to speak to this piece. If we do not speak to this piece that we have heard from NAACP, that we have heard from a National Bar Association, John Rowe, that we have heard from our local pastors and Lexington Black leaders and vicinity, that we have heard from those activists and protesters that have been mobilized for the last couple of months. We've heard from all of those groups this element. And if we do not address it as this committee, we have done violence to that. And so we shall address it, and we shall address it comprehensively, because I believe we serve at the pleasure of all those folks.
David, I want to ask for a clarification. I hear we're talking about the Citizens Review Board specifically, but are we also talking about disciplinary process generally?
I'm assuming you're asking the committee. Are you asking me?
I'm asking, when you say it, do you mean both the Citizens Review Board specifically, or do you mean disciplinary procedures generally, including but not limited to the Citizens Review Board?
Yes, this does not preclude us continuing to and examining the continuum of discipline and other things associated with it. This is one such answer that's been asked for by several groups, and one such piece to accountability and transparency. So yeah.
And Ms. Queen and Dr. Price have both said specifically that they want this committee to address disciplinary procedures, and they want to do that. And I heard Ms. Baird just now say she would. I do want to point out that we have to make sure that what we do is in accord with the open meetings law, and the law department can give us advice on how to proceed. And I don't know whether those people would want to act separately or together, but if they act as a unit or as a team, it's my understanding that they would have to comply with the open meetings law.
We'll get that answered for you all. Sister Minifield, if you're saying something, you're muted.
I would say that when I say the citizens review, I'm talking about just citizens involvement. I don't know what stage, but I think that's for transparency and to eliminate the possibility of biases, or at least a perception of biases, that they need to have. I mean, there's the statutory said there can't be any comment. You know, once a complaint is made, there's like a gag order put on. And so nobody is even able to know what's happening. So when I say Citizens Review Board, I'm not necessarily defining that as what's been defined throughout, other jurisdictions in other states, because I think our animal can come in at any stage that we feel that the public can be involved, and to have some transparency of the process that's occurring. Because I think that's where a lot of the problem is going on, that all of this is happening behind closed doors. And even the people who are making the complaints are feeling left out.
So what you're talking about is discipline, including but not limited to citizen involvement of any type.
Yes.
Right.
Pre-disciplinary involvement.
Can I also ask, we've got two very fine prosecutors in this commission. And there is a practice that's done both in the district and circuit court level. And that is in plea negotiations, oftentimes when there's a bad arrest, and we all know what we're talking about, the charge will be dismissed if there's a stipulation of probable cause, which serves to protect the officer, obviously, from any accountability for having done a bad arrest. Okay. Now, the problem I see with that is that it's changing the focus of the prosecutor, who's supposed to be concerned about criminal action and whether there's a legitimate case or not, with the obligations of the law department of the city to defend the police officer in case of an allegation of improper action. I see those two roles being improperly blended when the prosecution is trying to negotiate a stipulation of probable cause. I just think that needs to be addressed, and wonder whether that practice is legitimate. Should it continue, or should perhaps we look for some changes there? I see Judge Murphy shaking her head.
I will say on our end, we don't do it very often. A lot of that times that comes when there's some contentious going back and forth with respect to what a defendant says versus what, an officer says or whatever. Sometimes that is also to protect us, because we also, by that point, have gone through grand jury. And so a lot of times, that whole, they can indict a ham sandwich. I don't know where that came from, but let me just tell you, that's not true. So having been through grand jury. So sometimes that is just for us as well, in terms of allegations of malicious prosecution, regardless of the officer. Sometimes that's just for us too, because if we're going to then dismiss it, but we had a legitimate basis to believe going forward in grand jury and everything like that, that was a legitimate charge, but we're going to, I don't know, give the benefit of the doubt, or there's some question with respect to the legitimacy of that charge, we will do that. But we don't do that very often. It's very rare that we do that. But it isn't just necessarily to protect the police. It's a lot of times for us.
And I will say that it happens a lot in district court, at least,
Exactly.
and that's just part of the process. And I don't think that that's an inappropriate conversation to have it with the county attorney's office. I think that conversation to have with the county attorney's office as to the number of things that are dismissed based on the stipulation to probable cause for the arrest. And is that some sort of unwritten policy, because I know it's not a written policy, but is that some sort of written discretion that's being used? And we all understand that there's discretion, in prosecutorial, processing. So, but I do think that is a conversation that could be had with the county attorney's office, that should be had. And I think this committee, is imperative on us to look at that, because it does, change the focus of what we're supposed to be about, is ensuring justice is happening, and not just protecting, some person who's unjustifiable. So, so I think that's an appropriate conversation. I won't have it, but I think that that's an appropriate conversation to have with the county attorney's office.
And it probably needs, It probably needs to happen. You're right. And I think it should also include probably the law department, because I think it's always the assumption, just as Corsani said, that when that is done, that we're doing it on behalf, because the law department would want us to do it or want the prosecutors to do it. So that's probably why it's being done. But you're right. That's a conversation and something that needs to probably be put in the mix of this. But I think we have gone off of where Judge Kaufman was.
Well, I don't think we have. That's just where the spurs off of this trail are going to take us.
Yeah.
And
It's a
we
broad
want to,
issue. Yeah.
we want to identify these things, and we don't want to leave it undone again if we identify something else. So I see Brandon, and I see Dr. Price.
When we're talking about the review boards, you know, it's almost like a conversation I hear a lot where people are talking about justice, and justice may look different to a whole lot of different people, just like a review board may look different to a lot of different people. So do we need to be specific on what type of review board we are looking to have, since there are several different models of review boards, so that we don't say we want a review board, a citizens review board, and then it gets voted that we get a citizens review board, but then it's like, oh, but that's not the one that we wanted. So go ahead.
Well, I think I saw Dr. Price, but if I would, Brennan, if it gets out of our committee and we haven't properly vetted that and we haven't defined that, I think that's on us. So if it looks to be something that is not accurate or comprehensive, then we need to say it before we send this recommendation out of here. So you'll have that chance for sure. Dr. Price?
No, I was just going to say that to an outsider listening to this conversation with Judge Murphy and Ms. Minifield, I mean, part of what I would say or questions I would have about the practice of stipulating the probable cause is, are we masking behavior that only begins to amplify before it gets to the disciplinary process? And so in some cities, they have moved towards actually taking actions against calling officers where there are too many of these informal steps taken to prevent or to prevent their culpability in inappropriate behavior, right? So how that seems to me to be directly connected to the question of discipline. Not just discipline of prosecutors, that's beyond what we're asked to do, but that's a real question that's connected to, I think, there is a good argument to be made that some of the increased scrutiny of law enforcement probably should be increased scrutiny of
the prosecutor,
federal agencies. But that's beyond the question of this particular committee. But if you have officers where you are constantly using legal mechanisms in order to mask what is considered by those parties involved, like the prosecutor, for instance, to be a bad arrest, and it never reaches the question of discipline, what we have actually is a more pervasive concern about a kind of culture, a masking of some culture of inappropriate behavior, even if it's only what might be considered small behavior on the part of the law enforcement agency to those people who are embroiled in this process. That is a very, very large concern.
And if I can, just Chief Maynard may jump in. I haven't been there long, but I will say that the ones that I have seen, if we believe that it is egregious enough, or as you say, to prevent the masking, there is a public integrity unit officer who's there for preliminary hearings. And even if they're not there for pretrials, it is encouraged to the prosecutors to tell that lieutenant, hey, I had to dismiss this charge because of your officer did this, as a mechanism to go back and either he has to go to his sergeant and the sergeant has to reprimand or something. But I don't know what happens after that conversation takes place. So I can't sit here and say that happens in all cases, Dr. Price. I would never sit here and say that. But I do know I have had charges that have been dismissed from a prelim stage that I have done because I believe that it was not probable cause. And I'm looking at the lieutenant like, hey, you need to have a conversation with your guy. This isn't cool. but I don't know how that then transcends, whether there then is a conversation with the sergeant and so on. And I spent time reviewing arrests when I was at the county attorney's office and reviewing documents. And we tried to do this prior to it coming to the court so we wouldn't have that masking. But I can't say that that doesn't always happen, Dr. Price. I wouldn't sit here and say that. So Chief, if you.
Yeah. And I will say that I know that our office, when we believe that there's been a bad arrest and we got to, kick a charge out because there's been inappropriate, activity on behalf of the police, we are required to inform, our bosses, and then they are required to, we send a note over to the police department. I mean, we just don't let it die. I mean, that's not our role is to mask. So when we've got some totally inappropriate conduct that results in an arrest that we've got to dismiss, we've got to document it and send it up the line, and it gets back to the police department. I've never seen a police chief or commander or anybody not want to know what's going on with their patrol officers out there on the streets that's making these arrests. They want us to, give them that information.
You're exactly right.
Can I make a suggestion just a minute? We are an hour into the meeting and we've, really substantively discussed this one area of discipline. And I really think the detailed discussion might be better left to the people preparing a recommendation for the committee. We have other things on the agenda to talk about. This was a 2-meeting agenda, and I'm glad we did it that way because there's a lot to discuss. And we're going to have to talk about going forward. Our next meeting is on Thursday. And David and I wondered about this Thursday to Monday meeting where we have a 2-meeting agenda. And so we're going to have to think about whether it's the will of the group that we continue that. We're also going to have to decide whether we want to keep discussing this in depth or move on to other areas. What is the will of the group? Any preference? David, what do you think?
I certainly think that there is certainly enough interest and passion, certainly enough skill and expertise in that delegation that has been spoke most widely on this subject today. Yeah. And if you ladies and gentlemen that are interested would take that and get a recommendation around this and any ancillary components, because please have license to not preclude those ancillary components that are related, because we don't want a Band-Aid that's been happening for centuries. Right. We want to address it comprehensively. Some of them may be short, some may be intermediate, and some may be long-term, but address all of those issues that are contiguous to this one smaller issue.
And Laura will have
start talking about county attorney, and you start talking about Commonwealth attorney and the other areas that there are maybe germs or contaminants that are connected to this issue. Let us know, and let's formulate a plan around it.
And Laura will let us know tomorrow how to proceed according to law, and she'll discuss it with the law department, and maybe David and I will too. We'll see about that. Can we move? Do you want me to move forward with some of the other items on the agenda now, David, or is that okay?
I think it's okay. I see Laura and I saw Diane related to this one to close that out, and then Laura close us out on the logistics that you're about to tell us about.
Just Queen. I have down that our next meeting is Monday, the 27th. Not Thursday.
I'm sorry, I thought it was Thursday.
Monday, the 27th at 3.
I have Thursday, the 23rd at 3, and that's the only other meeting we have actually confirmed.
That's also what I have.
The 23rd at 3?
The 23rd at 3.
Nothing on Monday yet.
Yeah, nothing on Monday yet, unless we want to have this Thursday, Monday 2-meeting approach, 2-meeting agenda again until we finish this.
Okay.
I had it down for Monday the 20th and Monday the 27th. I didn't have another Thursday intervening, so.
Okay.
But I could be, I'm always wrong.
I thought it was the 23rd, but then I went by the agenda sheet that Laura sent out that had the 20th, 27th. So I thought
That's
maybe
what
I was
I had
wrong.
Thursday and then changed it when you had your agenda on there.
Yeah, I did the
Oh.
same, similarly the same.
Well, we never, okay.
I think
Oh,
we
we ha-
can fix that though. What time did you have that judge for Thursday? What time?
We had, last week we met at 3 o'clock from 3 to 4:30.
Okay.
And the week before we met from 3 to 4:30. And what I was wondering is, should we make this a regular process to meet on Thursdays from 3 to 4:30 and Mondays from 4 to 5:30?
I think what we need to do is whatever we adopted in the last meeting, and that was sent via email. So we'll have to confirm what that meeting schedule was, and I can see if I can find that.
Okay.
Okay,
Right.
I'll work
Okay.
on that.
Looking at this 2-meeting agenda we had, and David, with your agreement, I'll move forward, although somebody else had something else to say, I think.
Just Queen.
Ms. Queen?
No, I'm okay. It was answered. Thank you.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
I do have just one comment, Judge. It seems to me that we are a mayor's committee and that we should focus on things that the mayor can do and not, I know there's all these other issues and I agree wholeheartedly with everything that's been said. But to get into the county attorney, the Commonwealth's attorney, I mean, we're just all over the place. And I don't know if we shouldn't restrict our recommendations to what the mayor and the council can do, what they govern, what they have authority to do, which is the department itself, the police department and so forth. So I'm just throwing that out there because there are 10,000 different subjects that we could raise here, but I think since we are the only thing that can effectively be changed from our recommendations would be that the changes the city can make. And
Judge Isaac, I will interject that I know the mayor controls the purse strings of all of these agencies. And I know that when you
went to mute for
You've
some
muted
reason.
your microphone.
You got muted,
muted.
Diane.
Yeah.
I know that the mayor controls the purse strings for all of these agencies. Even our county attorney has a budget that the mayor supplies. The mayor supplies some of the budget to the sheriff's office. I mean, y'all don't get any money from the city at all, okay? None.
Nope.
So just the county attorney's office, does the Commonwealth get any money?
They get very little, just like you all get very little. So the thing is that they do get money, but like with the Commonwealth Attorney's Office, they get mostly grant funded money that funnels through, but it funnels through the police department. So honestly, as Judge Isaac say, I think what Judge Isaac has said, I think you're right, Diane. If we want to attach it to the money, then we could if we wanted to. But I think that if I'm not mistaken, the money that that the county attorney's office gets, it may be 100,000. Like it's not, and they pay for the space that you're in some sort of way, but it's not enough that I think that if Larry wanted to, he could bucket and do what he needed to do with his own budget. But what Judge Isaac said, I do think that it would be beneficial to focus on the things, but I think in essence, we still should put in our recommendations that we also believe that the Commonwealth and the county attorney's office needs to look at these things. But recommendations that we think can be active things should be the police department, should be the detention center, and those things that we have full access to.
Yeah, what the mayor has asked us to do is to identify systemic and systematic practices of racism, which have fostered structural inequalities, challenges and deficiencies in Lexington, Fayette County. So this is on her commission charge. And so we are to recommend and advocate systemic changes. And that's one reason we've talked about systems and not people. And she's actually asked us to look at it broadly. And I think that includes that includes all of these bodies that we're looking at. And she's going to have to decide whether she can or cannot do certain things, as well as the agencies looking at it. Her goal is systemic racism. It's not, what can I do in a very narrow way? It was pretty broad charge.
Thank you for clarifying that, Judge. You want to move ahead?
Yeah, we had discussions of other topics besides discipline on here. You know, some of these are because they're in the news so much. One was body cameras. I'm not taking these in any particular order, but one was body cameras. And Chief Maynard sent us a brand new policy that's in effect a week ago today, right, Chief? July 13th. And I guess that is in response to everything that's going on right now. Is that right?
The policy that I sent that Brianna, we had discussed, was the off-duty work authorization policy that included body-worn cameras for everyone that is working off-duty that currently is assigned a body-worn camera shall have those with them and activated while they're working.
Oh, that's the off-duty one. That's just the off-duty.
That was just the off-duty. The body-worn camera policy is updated as of April of this year. But again, we continually look for opportunities to update our policies, so that one is being worked through again. Just because it's updated doesn't mean we can't go back and continue to make adjustments to it. But the one that the body-worn camera is as of April of this year.
And we have that. We have that in our repository of documents, don't we, in our shared drive?
Yes,
Yeah.
ma'am.
One thing we have, one goal we have here is a discussion of this and maybe some of its issues, but also we want to know who wants to work on this with the end goal of formulating recommendations and a notion of looking at this for systemic racism. Now, we had one thing come up earlier, and that was Dr. Price at our last meeting said that someone could do a review of encounters on body cameras. I think you cited a police department in which an examination had been undertaken of these encounters to look at the quality of the contacts. You want to elaborate on that, Dr. Price?
No, I'll send you the article and I'll post it to the website. And I'll send it to Holly if she wants to post it and make it available to the public.
Okay.
Lauren Hatfield, we have a Holly Hatfield at the
right. Laura, yeah.
Lauren Hatfield. But I think that there is a way to think about how to use that cameras. I did have one question about the information the chief sent, which was, so when you look at the numbers over the years of either where cameras are turned off or defective or broken, they seem to be decreasing. Do you attribute that to training and a more comfort with wearing the cameras? Or have you just, can you talk to us a little bit about the time it took to for officers to become more efficient in following these policies around body-worn cameras?
Exactly. The body-worn cameras themselves are a rather new technology when you look at policing. We started in 2016 implementing some of those. 2017 in April was pretty much the first time we had all of our first responders, so to speak, not our administrative, some investigation folks don't have them, but for the patrol officers, every patrol officer and sergeant that's responding could be first one on scene has a body-worn camera. And it does take some time to get used to. We've got folks that have come on a long time ago, 20 plus years. That's a new tool for them. Where in the academy, we can incorporate that as part of the training. So we are seeing that one, training is helping get used to it. Two, the cameras themselves have changed a little bit. So our recent update in the camera itself, now when you push the button, it'll vibrate and let you know that it is on. So the technology itself is increasing to help with that awareness. We also have measures that we continue to put into place for audits and to check. I had talked about when the arrest or citations associated with body-worn camera, we check that quarterly to make sure those are ones that we know, hey, you should have a body-worn camera associated with anything that comes with a citation. So, and our officers are getting better at understanding that they wanted to have them on. They appreciate having those. So it's getting to the point now where I think it's a combination of all three: training, the technology, and audit controls are helping to drop those numbers as we continue to go.
So, but when complaints are made, complaint may be alleged against an officer who's not required to wear a body worn camera, then what kinds of evidence does that then return us to a circumstance of a he said, she said situation, or are there other cameras on the scene? I know that sometimes with detectives, there could be investigative units who are filming at that time. Is there a regulation around that type of video as well and preservation of it?
Yeah, so if an individual doesn't have a body worn camera, then we will look to see what other officers may have been present that did have a body worn camera, or other video that may be available, reference from a business or other locations. So we do try to look for that as well. We understand the need and the demand for everyone to have a body worn camera, and we are actively pursuing that and looking to see the costs associated with that and seeing where we can go for the entire agency to be outfitted with a body worn camera.
Chief, you can expect to get questions as we move along about every single issue here. Ms. Queen? Ms. Queen, you had your hand up and yeah.
Yes, I wanted to just ask about the chief about, certain different types of body worn cameras are activated by certain, some are manually activated by officers. Are there any other like trigger mechanisms that activate body worn cameras? Like for some that I've read about, speed, they're attached to, even like the siren lights and sirens trigger the body worn camera to come on. There's, I think I was looking at a host of things. If there's a crash that occurs involving a police officer in a unit in a police car, just different things like that. They're like sensors that are attached with those body worn cameras. I don't know if the cameras in the police department, are that type of camera or not. Are they?
No. So the technology that you're speaking of, it continues to be updated, and it comes at a cost. Okay. So there are systems, and Axon, who we currently have our contract through, is actually working through those. So there can be a sensor that if you pull your taser out of its holster or your firearm, then those sensors can automatically make sure your camera is running. And again, it's the cost associated with that. Our cameras currently, if you push the button, it will go back and record the last 30 seconds. It doesn't have the audio, but it'll go back and record the last 30 seconds if your camera was placed in the buffer mode, which is our requirement once you're on duty, that it's buffering. It is monitoring and recording the whole time. So if you are involved in an accident, and we have that does happen frequently with us, as the officer be driving along and involved in an accident, they immediately hit their camera button to turn it on. It'll go back and record that prior 30 seconds and hopefully captures that incident, so we see what happened prior to that. So that capability is there, but there's all kinds of technologies that you can incorporate. And again, it's the price of how you want to incorporate the technology with it.
I think for the public, it's hard to understand why not all the officers have a body cam available to them. I mean, if they're going to be involved with the public, detectives are involved in all kinds of activities, and they never have a body cam on them. So I know it's a financial issue, but in terms of the public, they would like to see everybody in the body cam that's going to be involved with these kind of law enforcement options. And then in looking at the policy, chief, I didn't see any disincentive for an officer who failed to turn on the body cam.
As far as discipline itself?
Yeah, I mean, do they get dock pay, or do they get anything if they don't do it right? Because I saw there's some of them, there were technical difficulties, and that's going to happen with any kind of equipment. That's human nature, But some of those things, they just didn't turn it on. And I didn't see.
And those are documented and are part of our disciplinary process. So after we've had 4 or 5 officers that have been charged for failing to activate their body worn camera involved with their disciplinary process. So there is the discipline side of it, which is what you're referring to, that it has its own disciplinary charge.
What happens then? What happens if an officer fails to do this?
That each one is on its own incident. It can be letter of reprimand. It can be, there's 3 things with our disciplinary process: letter of reprimand, suspension and or termination.
And how often does that happen, that if you don't turn on the machine, that you'll get a letter of reprimand? Or if it happens more than once, what is that like?
At this point, it's an open recommendation, so it depends on the incident, and chief can review that in its entirety of its own.
Well, I know, but in terms of say the last 12 months, how many people have been disciplined for not having turned on the machine, the camera?
The discipline that we provided, I don't have that in front of me, but we can look at that and it'll show us what they received for those body worn camera disciplinary.
You gave us the report, right, Chief? But
yes, sir.
What's being requested is the discipline there associated with that report. And
it's
in
noted
the
on
last 12 months, it is noted on there, the discipline is?
Yes, sir. Let me switch over to my Google Drive real quick and I can see, but it's on there and it says BWC next to the infraction of when those are noted.
Okay, there was some coding on there I wasn't quite clear of. So you gave us the numbers of those that don't have body cams, and we don't want to get too deep in the weeds on this, as we don't want any of them, but you did give us the numbers on the number of officers without body cams.
Of all sworn personnel.
Of all sworn personnel.
Yeah, majority of that is administrative type positions.
So it's not standard equipment yet before an officer can be deployed.
It is for the Bureau Patrol, majority of special operations, but we have some of our administrative folks, our training academy folks would not have a body worn camera because where they're in administrative role. Myself, several lieutenants are in administrative role. They do not have body worn cameras, but like I said, we understand the concern for that and we are working towards outfitting the entire agency.
Those cats that don't have, men or women that don't have body cams, do they have firearms?
Yes, sir, they do.
But that's standard equipment, but the body cam isn't. So that's just a concern. Yeah.
Is anyone interested in delving into this issue more deeply and giving the committee a report and a recommendation about body worn cameras? Anybody? Is it not a concern?
I mean, I think it's a concern. I don't want to take on more than I'm capable of doing. So I've already volunteered for something, but I do have a question when there's time.
Okay, no, we have time. Let's talk about it.
Just, I wanted to ask Chief Maynard is, like when an incident happens, involving a critical incident, and someone's, wearing a body worn camera, and I would presume the officer has to make a report about the incident and what happened. But, is the officer allowed to review the body worn camera, information before the report is made, or does the officer write the perception out of their first person kind of experience and then that's reviewed? What's the process?
Yeah, that's a great question, and one that we recognize in reviewing our body worn camera policy, and it is outlined in the policy itself. Of a critical incident in nature, we'll say an officer utilizes their firearm in an incident. They will not review that body worn camera prior because we want to know what they're feeling, what their perception, and what they observed without having gone back and seeing on the video. The video provides great perception of what the video is, but there's other things that come a part of that the officer being there, knowing that the video may not capture, maybe something off screen that they observed or smelled or heard that we want to know. So the officer will provide that written report prior to reviewing that body worn camera.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Chief, is the officer able to deactivate the body worn camera during the encounter and then reactivate it later during the encounter?
Yes, so the camera can be deactivated. We do ask that officer, and it has to be documented when they do that. There may be times where it's sensitive if they go inside of a hospital or a restricted area that they may not be able to turn it on, where we don't want to have patient records or a hospital doctor privilege type stuff being recorded, that they can turn that off. We ask that the officer document why they're turning off the camera, and then when they turn it back on, then it can go. But we also are now keeping records of when we turn it off. There's other times where where they may turn it off to speak to a supervisor or to a victim that says, listen, I don't want to provide my information on a camera. Then we ask that they document that and then turn it back on. So they can turn it on and off, but we have policy is asking for it to be on the entirety unless it's one of those situations where the privacy outweighs the need for the camera.
Judge Kaufman, we're looking at 5:25. We need to land the plane. We also need to get consensus on the
next meetings. Yeah,
meetings.
maybe all the next meetings for a pattern of meeting. You want to take that, David?
Yeah, we need to get consensus on our next meeting or a pattern of meetings. So we had the Monday on record is what Laura has found out. We can move to go to this Thursday, Monday cadence, understanding that everybody, understanding that things happen, but that we're getting to a place. Please know that we're going to start putting some things in ink. We're getting some concrete recommendations and some concrete work bubbling up. And so if we want to continue with this rhythm of Thursday and Monday, we can do that. Is what say the group on meeting this Thursday, which is is it the 24th?
That'll be the 23rd from 3 to 4:30, the same time as the other Thursday meetings.
And then jumping back on Monday, 27, 4 to 5:30.
Does anybody want to make a motion to that effect?
You want to help Miss Betty down them steps? We're on our way.
I make a motion that we do the Thursday, Monday meetings.
Second, anybody?
I'll second that.
Okay, everybody in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Okay, then we will start meeting on Thursdays at 3 and Mondays at 4 and continue this discussion next time. I would say that we probably all should take a look at this body worn camera and so we can discuss it. And if there's nobody who wants to work on it individually, then we can come up with something at the meeting. Also, we have had other areas of interest expressed. Dr. Price has specifically expressed an interest in selection or recruitment. Is that right, Dr. Price? And training?
Sure, if that's something that everyone is interested in, but I think Chief Maynard.
I would like to work with you on that too.
Okay.
Chief Maynard sent us some materials by email about from, I think it was his Police Chief Association, about some trends that are already taking place in that area around the assessment of the crews.
That would be helpful. And then Ms. Queen has, so Mr. Dunn is going to help with that, the hiring and, the hiring. And then Ms. Queen has talked about, in addition to what we've talked about today, collective bargaining and unions and training and recruitment. We will get those people some guidance tomorrow about working, about what the law department says about how you can work in those groups. And in between meetings, if you have an interest in an area, will you please email either the entire group or at least David and me so we can know where you have an interest in zeroing in. Remember, this is just the beginning.
Judge, can I ask a question, Judge?
Yeah.
And I know I'm late to the party today, everybody. I apologize. But on the body worn cameras, when you were asking if somebody wants to delve into that deeper, do you mean the parameters of the policies and procedures that will be used on how to?
Ms. Gunther, no, I'm talking about the whole issue, the issue of body worn cameras. Where are we today and where would you recommend we go with our report? Do you want to do that?
Judge, I will do that.
Well, you know what? It's yours. Yeah, and I don't have to worry since you're working with yourself. I don't have to worry about open meetings law.
Yeah, right. But I can speak with Chief, can't I?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Because you need information.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Gunther. I really appreciate that.
Mhm.
Okay.
Chief, would you go ahead and get us some, if there's been some cost analysis, because it sounds like it is a fiscal issue. But I like what I heard of Brother Clark Williams say the other day. There's no cost too great when democracy's at stake. And in this case, I would think there's no cost too great when justice is at stake. And so if you would go ahead and either pull the cost analysis or give us, to the best of your knowledge, the cost analysis to get our sworn officers all body worn cams, I think that's going to be needed at some juncture.
Yeah.
Or at least those officers who have a service weapon, if they're on the streets, that they're working a beat. I can understand that, like, Chief may not have a body camera.
Everybody on the street has a body worn camera that is responding, but we've asked for that cost analysis, and we'll get that to you once it's received.
Good. Okay. All right.
That's a good clarification. I didn't know everybody on the street had one. Thank you for that clarification. Sister Parsley, when we're going to cut it off here?
Yeah, we have
Yes.
5:30. Yeah.
I know we have a lot of different committees or, just people working on different things, but it would be helpful if everyone could kind of share what they're doing, because a lot of it is intertwined and it might give other people information that they need to obtain what they're working on. So if we could email as a group and maybe identify in the subject line what it's concerning, maybe that'll be helpful.
Yeah. As long as it's not substantive conversation. I think it's not subject to the open meetings law, but we are going to get some clarification on that.
Yeah, so let us clarify even now for this time in public interest, we do not have any additional committees. We have individuals that are working on points of interest as they can and are collaborating, but we don't have additional committees. We don't have the purview to assign or make different committees. We don't have different committees, but we have some folks working on these issues and ancillary issues. So, okay, good people. And for those that have joined, yes, Laura.
Meeting Thursday and Monday, do we want to commit to through the middle of August at this point, the end of August? We can always remove or add, but for the minutes, what are we committing to Thursdays and Mondays until?
I would say to the middle of August. Don't you think so, David?
I think so, with an iteration of this agenda, yes, because it's pretty comprehensive.
And go ahead, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and we're still not even finished with the agenda we had for the last time, but we can do a new agenda for the next two meetings.
Okay. I'll put us through August 13th.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I think we're ready to adjourn, and we will see you back here Thursday afternoon at 3:00. Thanks,
you all so
everybody.
much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.